This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
It makes the very same calling on our lives. We have a destiny, and it is time to seek your destiny. You see, what happened was God had started Abraham on his journey many, many years ago. In fact, in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, this is what it says. Terah, that's Abraham's son. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. Notice that, to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. What happened was, Ur is south area of the Mesopotamia there by the Persian Sea, and they went north, and Haran was up north, and they should have turned left and gone to Canaan, but they stayed in Haran. Why, we don't really know. But that's where they stayed, and that's where they spent some time, spent a few years in Haran. And now God comes to him and he says, all right, it's time to move on in the journey. God started you on your journey a long time ago, but many of us just settled in Haran. We stopped. We were on our way to where God wants us, but we got sidetracked and we settled there. But it's time to seek your destiny. It's time to move on from Haran. It's time to move to that land that God said, I have for you. Your destiny awaits. It's time to continue to where God wants you to be. You don't know how much time you have left. You don't know how long the journey's going to take. So you need to get started now. Now there are three very critical things that you need for your journey. And these three things are really mentioned in this passage. You need Abraham, you need Sarah, and you need Lot for your journey. Each of them represents something specific that you need for your journey, that you need to discover your destiny. Each of them represents something vital in the pursuit of God's destiny for your life. The first is Abraham. Abraham represents the will of God. Abraham represents God's will, or specifically obedience to God's will. Every time we see God speaking to Abraham, we see Abraham responding immediately. This is such an interesting thing about Abraham. God never came to Abraham and said, hey Abraham, I want you to move on to Canaan. And Abraham said, okay, let me think about this and let me make some plans and I'll get back together. And then him calling a committee meeting, to just kind of decide, and reading a few books and taking a few courses to decide how to do God's will. God said, this is what I want you to do. And Abraham said, okay. And he took off. Now, it's important to understand that we have to respond that way. When we know what God's will is, we have to respond to God's will. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to end up at our journey immediately. No, we're on our way. But we need to be completely obedient on the way. Abraham was obedient on the way. It took him a while to get to Canaan, but he was obedient on the way to Canaan. Notice what God said about Abram to Isaac, Abraham's son. God says this to Isaac in Genesis chapter 26, several chapters ahead of us now. And he says, I will make your descendants, speaking to Isaac, as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. God said, Abraham obeyed me. That's what impressed me. That's why I'm able to promise you all of this, because Abraham obeyed. Abraham represents God's will. And when God says that I am seeking obedience, what he's saying is when I have obedience, I can reveal my will. The more you obey, the more I can reveal. The closer you get to your destiny.